This is the Anthrobiology Podcast, hosted by me, Gabby LaPera. Every 2 weeks, I interview a biological anthropologist about what makes us, us. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back. I'm sorry I disappeared for so long. I had a string of bad luck that included a concussion, a stomach bug, and carpal tunnel. And I had a lot of catching up to do at my day job that actually pays my bills. But I'm finally all caught up and back on the horse again. I have some amazing episodes coming up with forensic anthropologists and bioarchaeologists and hopefully a primatologist too. But this week's episode is the final one in my mini series that I started way back in August, focusing on academic pathways. This time I talked to Chris Aris of the University of Kent about the differences between grad programs in the US and the UK. We also talked about grad school survival skills and choosing the right path for you. Just one note on this week's episode, I mentioned later on that some professors want to crack down on frat party-like atmospheres in field schools. What I failed to mention is that some fieldwork supervisors are the ones that are creating dangerous environments, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I missed that during the discussion. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the show. There's some really good advice in this one. Don't forget to rate the show and have a wonderful day. Hey there, everyone. My name is Gabby LaPera. You are joining me for another episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. Joining me here today via Skype at a totally different time of the day is Chris Aris, PhD candidate at the University of Kent. Welcome, Chris.
Hello.
It is very, very lovely to have you. Thank you for doing this. Listeners, if I sound groggy, it's because it's early for me. It's not even that early. It's 8:30 in the morning, but it's early for me. But Chris,
it's all right. If I sound groggy, it's because here in the UK, it is currently about 33 degrees and 80% humidity, and we don't have air conditioning. So yeah, we both might sound a little bit groggy.
I totally understand that. I live in San Francisco. There is no AC in the vast majority of buildings. I actually used to go to work when we were having heat waves and just stay there for 13 hours just so that I would have air conditioning.
I do not blame you at all.
But now I can't do that, so I just get by with the box fan. It's a good time. So listeners, I have Chris on here today because I kind of had this realization that I haven't actually talked to any students, much less people who are actually getting their PhD, and I wanted to kind of provide that perspective for y'all. And Chris very, very kindly volunteered to be my first guinea pig for this. And I also think it'll be really cool to talk to him because he can kind of illuminate, like between the two of us, I think we can kind of illuminate some of the differences in how it is to get your PhD in the States versus in England. Disclaimer, I did not get my PhD, I got my master's, but I was around it enough. I can speak to it.
You probably know enough people to get an idea of what we go through.
Exactly. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How about start with how you got into anthropology and what you study now?
So how I got into anthropology, I wish I had this really detailed romantic story, but realistically, how I got into anthropology was I was coming to the end of what we would call A-levels and what I believe in the US you would call high school. I was coming to the end of that. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Now, I also come from a family that's never gone to uni. I'm a first-gen academic, let alone the first person in my family to go to PhD. So I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had a vague interest in primatology, vague interest in biology, medicine, that sort of stuff. And I came home one day and my dad, bless him, had been sat at the computer. Now he can barely work a computer, but he'd been sat on Google all day. Like, he's one of the people who still thinks the monitor is the computer. That's how bad it is. I've tried to teach him and I've given up eventually, but he spent hours Googling and he just found this course at the University of Kent, which was biological anthropology. And the advertisement was a picture of a skull and a picture of a gorilla. And he went, I've had a look at this. This looks like something you would like. And I had a look and I went, yeah, that looks interesting. Had a look into it, applied to do it at university. And yeah, I ended up getting into it. Now, before I go into what I research now, I want to definitely say that that is possibly the worst reason to go to university. And I very much, and I've given a few careers talks like at my old schools as well, on whether or not you should go to university at all. And one of the things is I say, don't do what I did, because I was very lucky that I went to university for something I was like, oh, that looks vaguely interesting, and ended up falling in love with it and finding a career in it. Don't do what I did. Take your time. If you're not sure if you want to go to university, don't take your time.
I totally agree. This is actually like a mini rant that I have. When I was teaching at Nebraska, one of the things that I wish I could have said to my students is like, just take some time off. Like school here is very, very expensive. You're getting into a lot of debt. You're not even sure what you want to do. And especially for the kids who are on financial aid, who would then like fail out of classes because they didn't know what they wanted to do. It was just a terrible investment. Not even an investment. It was just a hole of debt that they would then have to climb out of.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yes.
We really do kids a disservice by not saying like, yeah, there's a lot of other options. Just take some time off. Like it's fine to come back to school when you're 24.
Yeah. I remember the first time I was invited back to my old school where I did my A-levels. And I remember being asked, so I went to quite a posh school by benefits of my inheritance from my great-grandmother. So I was at a school I did not fit into, but it was a very posh school. And I was invited back and asked to give a talk. And it was on careers advice, university admissions, etc. And I remember looking at the faces of horror as parents saw me and they thought, oh, we've come to this lecture by this graduate of this school. He's doing a PhD and he's got lots of fancy like job titles within that. He'll tell our pride and joy children to go to university, be successful. And then I stand up and I say, if you're not sure, don't go. I was like, just don't go. And I remember saying, you're better off, rather than wasting money going to university for a degree you think you need, or you've been tricked into thinking you need, or that you've convinced yourself that you need, go and work in Tesco's, which I think would be like the equivalent in the US of like Walmart. So I was like, go work there. And I'm seeing all these very, very well-off parents looking at me like they were going to hunt me down and murder me later on in the day.
Side note, I do think that everyone should work in the service or retail industry at some point. Because I think it breeds a degree of humanity that we are sorely lacking at this point.
Especially true, I think, for early career researchers like master students, PhDs. So for my last year of my PhD, I am still currently working at a holiday park. I'm an outdoor activity instructor, and there is nothing.
Wait, what do you instruct?
So everything from teaching like 3-year-old kids how to drive a little electric truck, all the way to like coaching archery, running paintball sessions, teaching people to drive quad bikes.
That sounds like so much fun.
It really is a lot of fun. And it's just fantastic to work with a group of people who have no idea what I do outside of there. And it keeps me grounded. It keeps me humble. And ultimately, it reminds me that, while I love my job, a job is a job. It doesn't have to be academic. As long as it's paying the bills and I don't hate it, then yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I started working when I was 14, and I worked all the way through college, and I worked all the way through my grad program. I actually don't think I was supposed to work through my grad program. I'm pretty sure there were rules saying that I wasn't allowed to. But I definitely bartended at night and I tutored student athletes. I didn't want to take out any loans. I was one of the lucky ones, right? Like I managed to go to grad school on a full ride, but that still didn't pay for my rent or all of those things. So I still needed money, and I didn't want to be in debt afterwards. Yeah. Plus, it's kind of fun to work. It is a good break from being in academia and honestly the politics that go along with it.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Massively so. I mean, I was never more productive on my PhD than after I started working, like in a non-academic position, because it meant every time I had the chance to come back to my work, like my academic work, my brain was clear, my mind was clear. I was, incentivized, and like I had a vitality to come at it. Whereas when that was what I was doing and only doing, burnout is a real thing. It was like trying to write like the last bits of my thesis. was like trying to trudge through fudge, like melted fudge and caramel. It was awful. It was just like trying to push myself through it. I could do it, but I was having to push myself through it. Whereas once I started working outside of academia as well, yeah, just burnout didn't go away, but it got better. It wasn't as bad. And I was way more productive and I was enjoying my academic stuff much, much more.
Yeah, I have like a couple theories. I've noticed the same thing. I think part of it for me is that if I have time to overthink things, I will. And so having a second job meant that I just didn't have time. It was like when I got a chance to sit down and write, I just had to write. I couldn't sit there and like stew about it for hours on end.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. Like absolutely. It's just, you had to get the work done. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, I'm just trying to think of another way of saying exactly what you said. You come at it and you haven't had time to overthink it. Your mind is clear and you just sort of do it.
Yeah. Yeah, they say that that's actually one of the issues for people who are perfectionists. Like the reason that they end up procrastinating so much is because they feel like they don't want to start until it's perfect, but it's better just to start and just go at it.
And especially in academia, like one of the worst things, and this is a personal opinion, and I say this now having published a few papers, I think one of the worst things to be in academia is a perfectionist. Now that probably sounds like an awful thing to say, and there might be people listening who are like, but that doesn't make any sense. But so Pia Nystrom was my master's dissertation supervisor, and I ended up publishing my master's dissertation with her and Elizabeth Craig Atkins. And I remember her saying, like, the paper was going between us again and again and again. We were going in circle with edit. And eventually Pia just turned around and went, look, it's never going to be perfect. And ultimately, the reviewers are going to find an issue with it somewhere. Let's let them find it. Why are we trying to find it for them? And it just taught me that your first manuscript is never going to be perfect. A journal or a reviewer or someone is always going to find an issue with it. So ultimately, if you're happy with it, let them find the issue, not you.
Yes. Yes. Wow. What great advice. I totally agree.
Oh, I think everyone should get like 2 hours of private tuition with Pia Nystrom. She would help a lot of people in that regard. She was brilliant.
I mean, I work as an editor now, so it's literally my job to find things that are wrong with other people's writing. And sometimes people turn in things that are so perfect. I'm like, damn, I guess I just have to pass this along, but I feel like I'm not doing my job if I don't find something. And that's definitely part of what you have to understand is like you said, like no matter what, someone's going to have an issue with it. And that's partially because they are paid or they are incentivized to find an issue with it. So
yeah, I've worked as a reviewer, specifically in this case. Obviously, I can't mention the paper or anything, but it was for the American Journal of Physical Anthropology. And I remember reading this one paper and going, yeah, I have no issues with this. This is really good. But I feel like having spent, over a week reading this article multiple times, I feel like I need to suggest something. So I was like desperately combing through it, looking for like tiny typos so I could say something, because it felt like I can't just say, yeah, except with no revisions, it's perfect, because then they'll think I didn't go over it. So yeah, I totally get what you mean.
Yeah, there should be a fourth option, which is except with no revisions. I read this painstakingly through. Don't worry.
I promise I read it. It's just really, really good.
Congratulations. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what kind of research you do?
Yes. Oh, sorry, I've totally derailed, haven't I? Two basic questions and I've gone on a total tangent. So yeah, what I researched, I'm a tooth person, one of many that are sort of emerging now. I specifically work on enamel, which is, that hard white bit that you can all see when you smile. I worked mostly on enamel growth rates. So basically how enamel grows, and not a lot of people know, but the way enamel grows is it grows in a very sequential style, in that you have little cells that secrete matrix that create your enamel, and they do this at a daily rate. So I can literally cut your tooth in half. Obviously, I won't. I'm not going to marauder around stealing people's teeth, but you can cut them in half, put them under a microscope, and you can actually see these little lines. And you can actually say, like, it took this many days for this part of the enamel to grow. We can look at it like to that level. So what my research does is I use that data to try and figure out how different human populations' enamel may have grown differently. Because basically there's this broad assumption that it hasn't really varied in humans as a species. However, there wasn't much evidence to test it. So my PhD was like a big, let's see if this is true or not.
That is a great topic. That's so interesting.
I would say the spoilers, but it's not spoilers because I've published 2 papers on it now. So the results were, yeah, massive variation between populations, not consistent at all in humans.
That's crazy. Do you know what some of the factors are that might dictate the differences, or is that like your next research paper?
That's the next. I would say so not next. It will be the next research paper.
The next like 20 research papers.
Yeah. So basically, I have a multiple theories that are all sort of at the end of my thesis going, well, we didn't expect to find this much difference. This is kind of crazy. Here are my theories. And now, yeah, I'm in that. I will be in that process once my PhD is officially finished in trying to get money to let people help me figure it out.
That is very, very exciting. So how far away are you from being done?
That I I have no idea. I guess in theory I'm pretty close. I'm in that thesis submitted awaiting Viva position.
Just a quick note for listeners. So in the States, it's a dissertation for your PhD and a thesis for your master's, and it's flipped in the UK.
Yeah. And there is no rhyme or reason for it.
Nope.
And frankly, in the UK, we interchange them.
Oh.
And I will interchange them probably in this discussion today. So if at any point I say my dissertation or my thesis, I could be referring to my master's or my PhD. I apologize in advance. It's a nightmare.
And that's actually another good thing to note is that the like master's PhD process is a little bit different in the UK as well. So in the States, a lot of times what happens is you finish your undergrad or you're about to finish your undergrad and you apply generally directly to PhD programs. There's really not that many terminal master's programs in the US, but that's not really how it works in the UK.
Yeah, so no, in the UK, your undergrad, your master's, and your PhD almost universally are totally separate entities. So most people will do a BA or a BSc, and then they'll do an MSc, an MA, or an MRes. So it's a separate thing. So MSc, Masters by Science, MA, Master of the Arts, and then MRes is Masters by Research, which is effectively like a mini PhD. So basically you do a much smaller project in the scope of like 1 to 2 years. And then the PhD is obviously a total separate entity where most people will spend 2.5 to 3.5 years just doing their PhD thesis. But ultimately, what's really weird is where I think in the US, like you said, programs that will more often be comboed is the master's and the PhD.
Yes.
In the UK, it's undergraduate and masters. So you might get what's called an integrated master's program where you do a 4-year undergraduate degree, but the last year is an integrated master's. So you finish with a bachelor's and a master's degree.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense than the way that we do it, because I think that the jump from undergraduate to a PhD program is kind of insane. And I will say that, so most PhD programs in the United States run starting at around 6 years. And that's because the first 2 years, you're essentially getting your master's and you do this exam in the middle of your PhD called your comps, your comprehensive exams. And some people choose to leave after that with a master's degree. Like sometimes your program will let you do that if they feel like for whatever reason, like you're just not going to do great in the PhD program. Or some people are just like, I've had enough of academia. Unfortunately, like the only way to find that out and a lot of the time is to get into these PhD programs, which are like hyper competitive. I personally went and got a terminal master's because I wasn't sure if I wanted to spend 6 years of my life doing this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you again. The idea to me that I would do my undergrad and then straight into my PhD, I would not have survived that at all. That would have ruined me. But I'm also I don't think anyone is the same academic at the end of their bachelor's as they are at the beginning of their PhD.
No, certainly not. And I did learn quite a bit in my master's. And taking those 2 years like really helped me make an informed decision about like what I wanted to do next in my career, which was not get my PhD.
Yeah. I mean, I spend a lot of time, and again, it sounds really hypocritical coming from someone who, because I did my undergrad straight into my master's, straight into my PhD. I didn't have like the only breaks I had were the summer break between them, and between my master's and my PhD, I think the break was like 3 weeks because I got accepted onto my program and I hadn't even had my master's results yet. Like I submitted my dissertation for my master's, and then 3 to 4 weeks later, I started my PhD. I spend a lot of time telling master's students that are either I'm teaching or that I know, because they'll come to me and say, "Oh, I'm thinking of doing this," and I say, "Why?" And then half the time I'm like, "Don't do a PhD." I was like, "'Cause either you don't need it, because what you want to do, you don't need a PhD, and if you do need it, you won't need it yet. And there is always that chance that if you really need it for a promotion or something, a lot of companies, depending on your field, will say, okay, yep, you need the PhD, we'll pay for it. So why do it just in case and pay for it yourself?" But then also, the PhD isn't for everyone. It is a weird beast of a thing, like even outside the differences between the US and the UK. And if that's not for you, that's totally fine. Like, I don't agree with the idea that if you have a PhD that you're better than anyone else. It's just you suit what a PhD is, and a PhD happens to change your title, and it happens to give you letters after your name. Ultimately, there is no issue if a PhD isn't for you, like at all.
Yeah. I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was talking about this fabulous researcher. Her name is Kari Brulhide, and she works at the Smithsonian. She works with Doug Owsley. And at one point I said something along the lines of like, oh, she just has her master's, but like she's really impressive. She works at the Smithsonian. And whoever I was talking to, very rightfully so, told me like a master's is a big deal and we shouldn't be so obsessed with the PhDs. Like, she's doing the work. And it's actually a pity that we fall back on assessing whether or not someone can perform academically with whether or not they have the degree.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I have a perfect example living with me, which is my fiance. Now, she's in the pharmaceutical side of science. So she's far, far smarter than I am and will probably be far more successful than I am, which is great for me. But
Congratulations.
as some people would say, just a master's. But like, her master's was a master's by research. It culminated in being published. It took her 2 years. She needed it to get into her field in which she now works. But a lot of people will still hear, oh, it's Chris and his fiance. They both have a master's degree, but Chris is doing a PhD. And they'll say to me, and I've heard this a million times, oh, you must be the smart one in the relationship. And I'm like, no, you need to spend 30 seconds with us as a couple to realize that I'm an idiot. And the fact that I've survived this long in life is down to her, not me. She's the smart one. She just happened to see, and she's very honest about this, she saw what the PhD was doing for me, and she decided not to. And she very actively decided not to because she was offered a fully funded PhD in the UK. And I don't quite know the differences between funding in the US and funding in the UK for PhDs, but the funding in the UK effectively gives you a decent wage. So it will pay for your time, for your rent, for your food. Like, you're not going to live a life of luxury, but you'll be comfortable. You'll be as comfortable as a student will ever be. And she turned that down because she saw what the PhD was doing for me and went, no, don't want that, don't need that, not doing that.
Good for her. Good for her. I don't know if I would have, if someone had come to me right after my master's and was like, yeah, guaranteed living wage, all of that, and you can continue on in anthropology, I might have said yes, but I probably still would have said no, actually, because of the mental health aspect of it, which is, I think, what we're kind of dancing around.
And yeah, if we're going to get into the topic of mental health, it's worth saying, like, off the bat, that this is not something that I am trained in, or I have expertise in. It's just something that I have a lot of empathy and a lot of experience in, like, with mental health, and especially in academics. Like, it is brutal. Like, even at like the early stages of the PhD, where you're having to learn the politics that you have to follow, the etiquette, what is required of you. There's the publish or perish mentality, and some of it's very real, some of it's perpetuated by people who've been in the field a long time and haven't sort of realized that things have changed. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yep. And then you also have, like, on top of the politics, one of the things that we're also talking a lot about in the field right now is that sometimes PhD advisors aren't super ethical. There's a lot of there are I'm not going to say a lot, but there are unethical people in the field, and that can especially affect people who are minorities or women.
Yep.
And that is just like a reality that you have to deal with. Like I dealt with that too to some extent. I think you'd be hard pressed to find any PhD candidate that at some point hasn't interacted with someone who for no reason whatsoever decided that they had it out for them.
Yep, I have experienced that, and it's worth bearing in mind saying now, I say that as a white man from England. I am massively privileged just by way of who I was born to be, and I've experienced, bad situations. I can only imagine and empathize with people who of our minority groups and women groups. Like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that really shouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, if you want a like super current example, there's that article that just came out about field schools, how some archaeology professors are like just sick of how field schools end up being like frat parties, and how it leads to situations that are dangerous more than anything else, both for the students, just for everyone there, but mainly for the students, because students are really in a position of vulnerability. And that I think is something that isn't really emphasized enough to undergrads going into a grad program. Like you really are at the mercy of your advisors and the professors around you.
Yep, 100%. And a lot of stuff I've tried to do. Now, it's worth saying that I don't have a lot of field school experience. I am very much I'm a lab rat. I'm a lab rat anthropologist. I have done field work. I've field work training, but ultimately I am most at home in the lab, aircon cranked up, cutting up teeth of people who've been dead 1,000 years. But I spent a lot of time, especially in my early days of teaching, talking to master students who are coming in and just explaining them to them. I'm like, this is the position you're in. It is very different to your undergrad. There is more expected of you. And unfortunately, no one's really going to tell you this. And that means that if you mess up, there isn't, I'm trying to think of the way to word this.
A safety net?
Yeah, perfect way to say it. Like there's a safety net for undergrads, which is taken away, I think, way too quickly for master's students. Like it needs to be explained to people coming into the postgraduate world that if you make a mistake, it is going to be on you, whether correct or not. There have been incidences I have seen when fresh master students straight out of their undergrad have said or done something. It's perfectly innocent, but it is against the status quo and the etiquette, and they have been steamrolled by someone far higher than them. And I'm sat there going, that could have been dealt with a lot better by just taking them aside and just explaining, that's not how it's done. And when the master student hasn't done anything serious, they just haven't read the room.
Yep.
As we would say here.
Yeah. And this is actually something that Dr. Tanya Smith, who also specializes in teeth and did an episode a few episodes back, we talked about a little bit, is that it's really hard on especially young academics who want to do something different, because you have to convince the people who are already in the field to give you your degree or to give you that teaching post. And if you publish something that goes against what they've been publishing for 20 years, even if it's right, you could shoot yourself in the foot, essentially, which is terrible.
I've had this happen to me, like directly happen to me. Now, it hasn't been too bad because luckily I had very strong evidence, but I can think of two situations where one of them was my first ever paper. I was publishing a method on how to determine sex from individuals using their teeth. I was sort of doing it in a sort of forensic context, trying to, now I don't know if this has been covered in your podcast, but there are methods to determine sex from skeletal remains. I don't know if, do you want me to cover that very quickly?
Yeah, why don't you go over it, because I know that people do not listen to these in order.
That's fine. Yeah, no, I'll go over it. I say I'm not a forensic anthropologist. I'm trained to be one, but it's not what I work at the moment. So basically there are multiple what's called sexually dimorphic traits of the human skeleton. Now, these tend to, now not in all cases, pertain to biological sex and biological sex only. So we can use these features to make a fairly accurate estimation, or determination, I should say, to be precise, of whether the person was biologically male or female from their skeletal and dental remains.
I'm just going to break in here real quick. The reason that Chris is emphasizing biological, he's trying to distinguish between biological sex and gender. So gender can be whatever the person feels it is. Biological sex is going to be whatever you were born with. And this isn't, then there's like that whole difficult intersex category that we're just like not going to deal with here, because biologically that is like very complicated to understand. But like very generally, biological sex, your only options are male or female, very, very generally. Please proceed.
I mean, to be fair, we can very, very briefly touch on the intersex section. Now, I am not a specialist, but when it comes to determining biological sex, we do have methods to go indeterminate. So we're not sure.
Yes.
And the vast majority of forensic anthropologists, if it is not incredibly clear, they will say indeterminate, do not use. Because obviously, if a forensic anthropologist is determining something from a set of skeletal remains, it's in a forensic legal context. There is no room for if, maybe.
Right.
So there is a point where if there was some intersex issues, chances are biological sex would not be determined.
Definitely. And actually, this is something that we've covered on the podcast too, is that different populations have like varying degrees of sexual dimorphism. So sexual dimorphism is the difference that you see in male and female specimens based on sexual characteristics. But there are certain populations that have a lesser degree of sexual dimorphism between male and female. And sometimes it can just be really hard to determine for that particular group.
Yep, absolutely. So that's broadly what I was looking at. Now, we can do that fairly accurately on adults, not very accurately on what we would call sub-adults in forensic anthropology. Depends on who you're talking to, how they define it. But generally speaking, anyone under the age of 18 years at time of death can get tricky, especially younger than like 12, 14. And my paper looked at upper first molars, and it was taking measurements of them. My argument being, if this tooth is sexually dimorphic, it is developing when individuals are as young as 3 to 5 years. So if this is sexually dimorphic, we could in theory make a sex determination of individuals as young as that, which is therefore very useful in a forensic situation.
Yeah.
So I was doing this study, my method was working, and I had a number of cases where I was told, but you can't say that because you're not a forensic anthropologist. And I was also told, I don't believe your method works. And I turned around and went, but I have the data and it's published. And they go, yes, but I don't think it works. And I was told this, and I was like, I don't know where to go from here. And it was because it was challenging what certain people didn't believe. And I couldn't at the time understand. I'm like, but I found a cool, interesting thing. Why am I being put down for it?
Yeah. And that just, there's a lot of head games in academia is what it boils down to.
And there doesn't need to be. And this I think comes from, and I've spoken about this to, people I've worked with and people I will in the future work with, about how, especially me, I was very confused when I was sort of getting into academic politics and academic etiquette for the first time. Because again, I'm a first-gen academic. I don't know any of this. I don't know, or I do now, but I didn't know at the beginning, where does my supervisor go in an authorship of a conference poster? Where do I go? Who should be second? Who should be last? I didn't know any of this, but there is this assumption that everyone, the moment you graduate with your undergraduate degree, if you get onto a master's program or a PhD program, you must know all of this. And don't quite understand why, because everyone has to learn it at some point,
right?
But there is no official teaching it.
And it's like also not just the etiquette, it's like also all of the unspoken power structures.
Yep.
That's even more difficult to maneuver, because like to a certain degree, like people are sometimes more willing to overlook like the etiquette stuff. They're like, oh, like just a baby master student. But like, especially like if you accidentally offend someone, like sometimes that person hates you for life, which is crazy. Because it's like, you're what, like a 21-year-old? You're just like a dumb 21-year-old wandering around being stupid because you're 21. If you're 21, you're probably not actually stupid. Just disclaimer. But I was real stupid when I was 21.
Oh, so was I. So absolutely I was. I mean, you're not the same person you are at 18 when you start university. You are not the same person when you graduate your undergrad. You are a totally different person by the time you start your PhD. And I am now a totally different person. Now I'm coming to the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I spend a lot of time, and again, first gen academic, I totally appreciate that people coming into this don't know. And I've had the fortune of teaching a lot of master's students. And a lot of the stuff I do in their early weeks is I teach them, this is what is expected of you now. This is the power you have in terms of your research. And this is the power your supervisor has. Your supervisor at master's and PhD level, they are so important. In some cases can be your confidant, they can be the person helping you with your research, the person getting you your first job, the person helping guide your research so it's, novel research.
Ideally.
And definitely ideally. Let's say this is an ideal situation. They are all of these wonderful things. No one teaches you when you can go, well, actually, no. And I remember I had my first experience of this during my master's degree with that research project that I then went on to publish. I remember walking into my first supervisor meeting, and my supervisor, who again I'm still in contact with now, we're friends now, we work together. She said, I don't think this is going to work, and I think you should pick something new. And I remember going, well, no, actually, I'm gonna stick to my guns. And I said, well, actually, I think it will, and if it doesn't, it's a master's project. Does it matter that much if this is a flop? If I find nothing, I've still got enough to. My dissertation can be, I had this method didn't work.
Yes, and that's very important information. I think that we really get caught up on being like, oh, I found something new, as opposed to being, and everyone heaps praise on that. But it's also really important to be like, I tried this new thing, it doesn't work.
Yeah, half my most recent paper, in fact, 3/4 of my most recent paper is saying I found nothing comparing XY group.
Mm-hmm.
And I found nothing comparing XZ or XA. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I remember my supervisor going, yeah, actually, you have a point, go ahead. And then that led to a publication, networking opportunities at that university. And that is a university I will now in a few weeks go on to work for.
Congratulations.
Thank you. If I hadn't have, stuck to my guns in that moment 5 years ago, I honestly probably wouldn't be going on to a job in 3 weeks, or at least not the job I've got. So I like to tell master's students, look, yes, your supervisor probably has the veto power, but you now, just by grace of being a master's student, have the power to go, no, this is what I want to do. You are experienced, you are trained enough. And that is only more true of PhD students. You do have that power to go, no, this is my research project. I'm going to do this. Yes, if your supervisor's really strongly hinting you should do something else, probably worth listening to them. They probably have decades more experience than you. But if their thinking is sort of, I disagree, then you do have that ability and that right to go, no, actually, I would like to do this.
With the caveat being that hopefully your supervisor is a reasonable person, because if they're not, they can also make your life hell and make it impossible for you to graduate. Not to scare anyone out there who is thinking about doing a grad program.
No, I mean, no, it's worth saying. Get a good supervisor.
Yeah.
Talk to people, and you can look up the supervisory record of most academics. It's normally freely available on their institution profile. Look it up. Find those people they've supervised. Email them, because no one will be more keen to warn you away from someone if they're a bad supervisor than someone who's been through it.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And I know how that I've known of people that has happened to and they've spoken to. Do your research definitely into your supervisor, because this is someone who and even let's look at the UK as an example. Let's say you're lucky enough, you're only going to have to work with them for 3 years. They are still going to be the reference that you have to ask for. Maybe your first, 1 to 3 jobs. They are going to be the referee on your grant applications. So until you've moved on past your PhD onto your first, second job, and you've established more connections to get a different reference, this person will have a lot of power.
Yes.
Over your career opportunities.
Yeah.
So absolutely research them, but equally talk to them. Almost every supervisor I know is more than happy just to have a meeting with you if you can make it into their office hours. Now, I know that's a little bit funky given what's going on in the world at the moment. But
Just
again,
in
assuming
case you're listening to this in like 2030, there's a pandemic happening right now.
Yeah, so a lot going on right now. But yeah, in an ideal situation where you can travel to them and talk to them, or Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams, these are all massively used nowadays. Ask, can you have a meeting? Talk to them, get their vibe. We as humans tend to be quite good at reading people and body language. If you're not getting good vibes off them, that's fine. Go find another supervisor.
Yeah.
There is so many people out there at the moment.
Yeah, and trust your gut on this too. Like intuition, a lot of people discount, especially like women's intuition. The thing is that they've done studies showing that intuition sometimes is actually just your brain picking up on a lot of signals that don't rise to the conscious level.
Yeah.
And like if you get a bad gut feeling, like that there's probably something there, you just can't articulate it. And that's okay. It's okay to say no. One thing I actually did want to talk a little bit about too, you mentioned that you're going to become a teaching associate. I don't know what it's like there, but at least in the States, a lot of times they throw grad students into the deep end as TAs and they're like, okay, teach now. And you're like, I don't know how. Like no one has ever taught me how to teach. I feel like I really enjoyed teaching, but I also wish that there had been someone there to kind of give me more guidance. Like the first time I had a student come in one time who had never learned how to do algebra, basic algebra, right? So like P plus 10 equals 20. What is P? And I was just like, I was so deeply unprepared for like how to deal with that. Like I didn't know. And so like for like situations like that, I'd wish I had training, but then also other things like just like how do you, especially when you're young, like how do you convince all of these 18-year-olds that you are in a position of authority over them and that they should listen to you?
Oh, this is something I'm massively terrified by, because in 3 weeks I will have graduate students that work for me. And in my head, I am a graduate student. Mm-hmm. So what's up with that? So I'm very lucky. I have been teaching in one way or another since I was 16, so 10 years. Now, when I was 16, I was teaching, and this is going to sound really nerdy, but I was teaching karate for my local karate club that I did the sport with. And, I got my black belt, I started teaching. I was rubbish at it. I was throwing my weight around, I'm the big man around now. You have to listen to me. And I very rapidly learned there is nothing worse for getting like young children interested in what you're teaching them than shouting at them. So I managed to have a very early learning experience.
Yes.
But in terms of university, if anyone out there is, doing their PhD or even their master's, and they're like, I would like to go into teaching, university level or otherwise, and you want experience, ask for it. Like during my PhD, I said to my supervisor, other module directors, I'm like, can I come teach for you, paid or otherwise? Can I come do it? Can I come do it? And I got experience giving lectures, running labs, running field work, like mock field work sites. I got marking experience, and these are all things that look great on the CV. And actually, just having the experience doing it, you get to learn, because it's as much learning how to teach as how you teach. Mm-hmm. Because I am and anyone listening to me, I speak quite quickly. I have quite a loud voice. I like to project and just give off this faux air of energy and enthusiasm. And I am enthusiastic, but I'm also a very tired, jaded coffee addict. So a lot of it is just learning how you teach. And the only way to do it is experience and knowing that you're going to suck for the first few times.
Yes.
You're going to be rubbish. And then the first time a student comes to you with a question and they ask it and you're like, I should know it, I don't know it, you will pretend to know it, you will give a rubbish answer. But eventually you will learn that you will have your own teaching style. You just need experience. And it's okay to tell a student, I don't know, that's not my specialty. That's totally fine.
Yes.
Just have an answer for them next week. Just go Google it.
Yep. I think it's
totally fine.
That was one of the most important things I learned too, was just saying like, I don't know, I'll tell you next week when you come to class, or if anyone ever comes to office hours. But yeah, no, I had a very similar trajectory. Like I started teaching at a horseback riding summer camp around the time I was 16. And then I taught people how to write in college. So I had those experiences, but like I think that there's like a difference between that kind of teaching and then like university level teaching. And I will say that it does sound like there is a little bit of a difference in the system, in that a lot of grad students in the US are expected to become teaching assistants at some point during their career, especially if they want any of their tuition reimbursed. And so like it's something that a lot of people have to do, even if they don't want to do it.
So in the UK, there are some. So like I was at I am at the University of Kent, I should say, for my PhD. They have a scholarship now. I wasn't on this scholarship, but it's called the GTA, which is the Graduate Teaching Assistant Scholarship, where basically, yes, they get that stipend, they get the research support, they get the money, but they are expected to teach X number of hours per year. But that is not necessarily a common thing in the UK. These exist, but it's not everyone's on one. Not everyone is expected to teach. And it was something that I had to go looking for. And without that experience, well, to be fair, without that experience, I probably wouldn't have got the job that I have. But if I was going into that job without that experience, I would be even more terrified than I am now.
Yep.
Because some of the roles and responsibilities I will have under that job, imposter syndrome. It be coming. It's very scary.
Yep. That's why I really wish, honestly, there's some professors who would benefit from having a class on how to teach.
Yep.
Even though they're professors and they've been teaching for forever, like there are some professors who are, everyone who has gone to college, everyone who's gone to school has experienced this. They have had a teacher that is just terrible at teaching. And I feel like we've all been teaching for so long, like surely there are some best practices that we can just impart to the next generation.
No, absolutely. And I think a part of that as well, to not defend those academics who don't teach in the best ways, but to play as somewhat of a devil's advocate. Sometimes they are people who are far more interested in research, and it was a part of their job role.
Yes.
Like, you are going to be doing 99% research, but you have to run this one module, and they really don't want to be there. That is not to defend; they should still put their all into it. But yeah, sometimes it's like, the university might be pushing them into doing it.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. My freshman year astronomy class, I had a professor who had never taught freshmen before, so first years. And his area of study was black holes. So we spent a ton of time on black holes and very little time on the rest of astronomy. And no one really understood anything because black holes are complicated.
Oh, I'm so guilty of this. I remember at the beginning of my teaching, I've taught like 80% of my teaching has been master's students. I remember giving my first undergraduate lecture, and I was asked, can you do, I think it was dental, it was for a human osteology module, introduction to human osteology. So this was like the main bones of the body, ignore the hands, feet, skull, which is massively complicated. Like, they only had to know like the plates of the skull, the jaw, the arms, the legs, the pelvis, the spine. That's basically all they were taught, and the ribs as well. And I was like, they were like, can you teach the tooth and dental categories? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And then like half an hour on tooth types. This is deciduous teeth, juvenile teeth. This is adult teeth. This is what an incisor is. This is what a canine is. This is what a premolar is. This is what a molar, etc., etc. And then the next half, I'm like, right, now let's teach you how teeth grow. And I just watched second-year undergraduates' brains melting in front of me. And I remember halfway through it going, they probably don't need to know this. I only learned this as a part of my master's degree. Maybe I've misread the room here. And I remember finishing that lecture very quickly and telling them at the end, just so you know, you won't be tested on the growth stuff. You'll just be tested on identifying them. And I could see the relief in their faces. And I was like, lesson learned. Don't teach second-year undergraduates the same as nearly finished master's degree students.
Yes. Yeah, it's like stuff like that where it's like, it's kind of like after you realize it, you're like, duh, of course. But it would be great if someone just told it to you up front so you wouldn't have to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. There needs to be resources, just like basics of academic etiquette and basics of teaching for a university, just like small little resources.
And basics for how to take care of yourself mentally.
Absolutely. Like, you've got to know how to look after yourself. I remember I think it was 2 tweets. And this sounds, I mean, I'm a massive millennial here saying that I learned this through Twitter, but 2 tweets changed the way I approach my PhD. And one of them was like, it was the generic, if you're doing a PhD and you're not working 9 to 5, you're doing it wrong. Like, wake up, have your breakfast, 9 o'clock, start. Hour lunch, and it was hour lunch, not half an hour. Give yourself an hour, finish at 5. Your productivity will go up. You will finish faster, and you will have more of a life.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I went, let's try this. 2 weeks in, I was sleeping better. I was eating better. I was working out more. I was happier. And I was getting more done to a better level. And then the other one was, it was basically someone saying, I know so many PhD students who like skip out on social interactions and doing fun stuff on the basis of, oh, I'll do that when my PhD is over. My life will start when my PhD is finished. And they were like, that is BS. Now I'm going to keep it family friendly. So that's rubbish. You have to give yourself time. Treat this like a job. Give yourself the odd week off every few months. Take holiday. So I started doing that, and lo and behold, my productivity went up again. The efficiency and level of my work went up. Everything got better. And I wish I'd been told that, like, off the bat. And not only been told that, had it hammered into me.
Mm-hmm.
Because every PhD student, when they start, everyone thinks, I'll be different. This won't affect me. I'll be fine. No, you won't.
Yeah.
PhDs are horrible. There is a reason that you get to put letters after your name, and it's because you are going to suffer. Now, I don't want to put anyone off doing a PhD who wants to, but I want everyone to understand that it's really tough. You need a support network. You need to talk to people. You need to look after yourself, because you are way more important than your research.
Yeah.
Like, way more important.
And just to be clear, because I think this is something that people also don't really talk about that much. It's like, for me, the academic portion of my master's was super fun. Like, even doing the research was super fun. What wasn't fun was all of the politics and all of the like etiquette and all of the other things that we've mentioned, right? And those are the things that are probably going to wear you down much more so than getting to study what you love, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So anyway, I have taken up a ton of your time. I also
we've been talking.
Yeah, I also have to go to work.
Sorry.
It's totally fine. But I do want to finish up with our regular 3 questions. So first question, we've kind of talked a lot about a lot of different things, both about like your area of expertise and also just generally what it's like to be a grad student. What would you recommend people read, either in teeth or in like some way to prepare for grad school?
Can I be really nerdy?
Yeah.
And really self-promoting and make it really specific to what I study?
Yeah. That's what this part of the interview is for. Go.
Read a paper by Aris 2020 that I may or may not have written, titled The Histological Paradox, Methodology and Efficacy of Dental Sectioning. Because if you're going to go into dental histology, a very quick explanation, histology is a fancy way of saying cutting something up and making it really thin so you can look at it under a microscope.
Mm-hmm.
And we've spoken a lot about politics. There is a lot of politics in the destructive sampling of human teeth or in any teeth. And there are rules, but no one teaches them to you. And I had to kind of learn them on the fly. And the methodology you kind of have to learn on the fly. And I realized no one had written a paper on this. So I wrote a paper just on the ethical things you need to consider and how to do it. So if you're going to do a project on dental histology and you want to like a really quick introduction, like a detailed introduction with lots of references you can follow on the methods you're going to use and the ethics, you can check out my paper if you want to.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great recommendation, because I think that is a good way for people, regardless of whether or not you want to study teeth, to kind of get insight into all of the things that go into being able to do work that you maybe aren't told explicitly up front.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And it's also written, I was very lucky, I wrote it for a journal called The Papers from the Institute of Archaeology. And they are one of those journals that's like, we're a small journal and we want students and ECRs, early career researchers, to submit to us so you can get used to the publishing process. They're also open access. So basically what that means is anyone who wants to read it can read it totally free. There's no paywall at all. and they let me write it in a it is sciencey. It has to be because I'm writing about methodology, but it is written in an approachable way. It's not really overly wordy if it doesn't need to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think it's fairly approachable.
Awesome. Great recommendation. What are you reading for work right now?
What am I reading for work? I mean, currently and this is going to sound really sad, but it is true. The module outlines for the modules I'm going to be directing in 3 weeks.
Great.
And I wish I could say I'm reading something more interesting, but that's all I have time to read at the moment.
No, it's fine. You got to be prepared. We were just talking about that. And then last question, what are you consuming for fun right now?
What am I consuming for fun now? If you haven't worked out, I am a massive nerd. I am currently reading a graphic novel or comic series called Saga, which is exceptionally written. And we've spoken about mental health. And if you want to see mental health aspects and dealing with it and support structures dealt with in a very ethical and well thought out, and I'm trying to think of the nice word for that, it goes with ethical, but sensitive, that's what I'm looking for, in a sensitive way, set in a very sci-fi fantasy setting, I recommend checking that out. It's a really good series.
Awesome. What a great recommendation. I think this is the first time that anyone has recommended a graphic novel. So thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I feel like a massive fake academic sometimes because a lot of people, especially in anthropology and archaeology, they're like, I went on holiday and I visited this museum and went sightseeing. And I'm like, cool. I took holiday. I lifted a load of weights. I played video games and read comics. I feel like massively fake academic sometimes.
I have to say that the vast majority of people that I knew in grad school were more like you. And also my supervisor at the Smithsonian, what he did on his time off was that he ran a hobby farm. I feel like I don't know. I feel like whatever makes you happy, that's what's most important. That's the message that everyone should take away from this podcast, from this particular episode.
As long as it is safe and consensual by all parties involved, do what makes you happy. Absolutely.
Exactly. All right. On that note, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
This has been great. I'm sure that we will have you on again one day to talk about your research more in depth.
I will come back anytime you will have me. This has been wonderful.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me at gabby.lapera@anthrobiology.com. That's spelled GABY.LAPERA@anthrobiology.com. This show is produced by me. Music courtesy of Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear at Sound of Picture.